Hi, and welcome to Unmuted, where I have candid connectivity conversations with industry experts. Today, I'm joined by Larbi Belkhit, an industry analyst with ABI Research. Hi, Larbi. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I have you here to walk me through some of ABI Research's recent findings around the telco GPU as a service opportunity. Your firm is actually projecting that they could generate more than $21 billion in revenue by 2023. And I thought to start, maybe you could briefly explain the report's findings, some things you think are important for us to know before we really jump in.
Absolutely. So, what we're seeing today in 2025 is that telcos are at the very early stages of an AI infrastructure race. And we believe going forward that GPU as a service is going to be foundational to this AI infrastructure ROI and monetization strategy, which is why we predict that they'll generate more than $21 billion of revenue by 2030. This is much less today. It's like less than $1 billion right now, and most of the revenue today and in the future will be generated by AI inference workloads. Our research shows that many telcos are currently upgrading their existing data center portfolios and even building new AI optimized data centers, which are sometimes called AI factories. And the continuous innovation in the AI industry creates a unique opportunity for telcos to converge the communication business and the compute business together.
Great. Thank you for that brief rundown. And everyone is going after AI right now in one way or another. They're all looking at that big opportunity. So what core capabilities differentiate GPU as a service offerings from telco versus, say, hyperscalers or cloud native providers?
And that's a great question. And an overview would be that telcos can be the best of both worlds between the hyperscalers and alternative cloud providers in their value proposition. Hyperscalers have a deep cloud expertise on a global scale, but are considered to be less flexible in terms of pricing and billing, and have a vast amount of legacy infrastructure which is optimized for traditional IT compute. Alternative cloud providers, on the other hand, are much more optimized for AI workloads, but many are heavily dependent on the growth of GPU demand for their business model and cannot offer a full stack cloud solution to end users. Telcos can be the in between, or the bridge, as it were, and this position allows telcos to have a great opportunity to win business where AI sovereignty matters just as much as compute.
Right. And as this is unfolding, what regional patterns are you seeing? Are APAC and EMEA maintaining the early lead that I know you identified in the report? Is North America catching up? What are you seeing?
So, absolutely. So, as you just said, we identified that Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe are leading the race currently. But Europe and Asia Pacific have slightly different drivers behind this growth. The underlying thread between the two regions is the sovereignty demands, right? But in Asia Pacific, telcos are partnering with governments for contracts, likely driven to the fact that they need sovereign infrastructure to develop national language LLMs for their native country. In Europe, we're seeing something slightly different, where the demand is coming from the manufacturing sector and helping the industry with industrial automation. So you may have seen the Deutsche Telekom announcement that came out, I believe, in June, where they're planning to start their AI gigafactory, as they like to call it, which I believe will comprise of 100,000 GPUs in 2026 in Germany. And by the way, Asia Pacific is not unique to this. Middle East is also doing the same thing as them because they need Arabic language models and the like.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen a lot of announcements coming out with Arabic language, and I know that SK Telecom, I think, has an LLM for their native language. So I am seeing a lot of movement there with what you're talking about. Speaking of SK Telecom, actually, they just unveiled a GPU as a service platform built on more than 1,000 NVIDIA GPUs. Can you provide additional insight into this offering, what it signals for the global market, like competitive dynamics, regional differentiation, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So the initial launch of the GPU as a service platform by SK Telecom came in January earlier this year. And this cluster was based on NVIDIA H100 GPUs, and the initial plan was for there to be an upgrade cycle to the NVIDIA H200s later in the first quarter of this year. However, this announcement upgrades to the B200 GPUs, which are much more powerful, and indicates that there's a lot of demand for the compute that SK Telecom is offering in South Korea, likely driven to the fact that as part of this press release, they announced that they're going to be using this cluster as part of the proprietary AI foundation model project in South Korea for the government. Strategically, SK Telecom want to use the data center they've developed for this offering and make it a core hub of the growth of Korea's AI industry. And more broadly, it signals to the industry that trust that governments have in partnering with telcos for AI compute, and resources should be considered and this vertical, should be considered a key target for telcos when going to market with GPU as a service.
Okay, I feel like you've done a pretty good job illustrating the opportunities here for telcos, but what are some of the biggest risks that they're facing during this transition?
Absolutely. You're correct to say that there is big opportunity here, but there's also big risk. And I would say there are three pillars to the risks that telcos face. First is capital intensity. The continuous, consistent investment cycle in the cloud space is very different in terms of cadence, to the communications industry, where there's big refresh cycles every 10 years or so, whereas as we're seeing with the AI industry, it's pretty much every year there's a refresh of the best next GPU being offered to enterprise, and there's demand for these GPUs from the industry as well. The second, I would say, is both under and overestimating the short and long-term revenue opportunity, because the AI industry is moving at an incredibly fast pace, and it will not wait for telcos to generate this revenue. So telcos can't afford to be left behind here and be delegated to just being a facilitator of this AI compute being driven over their network and not being able to monetize it themselves. So, however, overinvest too early will very much hurt the financial positions of these telcos, because it's an expensive business without subsidies from governments or another third party like outside investment. And the last, I would say, risk would be a continuous over-reliance on the partnerships they're establishing. Right now, many telcos are partnering with alternative cloud providers, or as they're sometimes called, neoclouds, when going to market with GPU as a service. But too much reliance on this means that telcos will not have a sufficient amount of control over their offerings moving forward. This is why we're seeing the likes of SK Telecom move away from off-the-shelf orchestration platform to developing an in-house proprietary solution, which I believe is called Pegasus, according to their press release. And now they're using this commercially.
Yeah, great. And just to pick out one of the things you said there, let's talk more about the expensive AI element, right? So given its high CapEx and OpEx profile, how are telcos calculating ROI and avoiding this whole AI for AI's sake issue? Because like you said, they have to be doing AI. They have to be at the forefront of this. But how are they making sure they're not overdoing it, or that they don't have the best strategy going forward?
Absolutely. There is definitely a sense of a pragmatic approach right now to the AI investment. Many of the announced services from telcos in terms of GPU as a service come with at least one flagship external custom from day one. Telenor, let's use them as an example. They launched their AI factory, but the main purpose of this factory was for internal workloads. And they realized there was demand for the compute they had from external customers. So their first external customer, I believe, was Hive Autonomy, which is in the industrial automation space. So it's very much investing in AI to improve their traditional telco business, building up this compute to make sure they're improving the OpEx of their traditional communications industry, as well as looking at the demand for external workloads. So there is definitely being a balanced approach. So when calculating ROI, it's not just the revenue generated by the GPU compute at a data center from GPU as a service, but the benefits it brings to the traditional comms business as well.
Awesome. And for my last question, is there a real risk of hyperscaler dependence eroding telco ability to monetize their own investments? I guess you were sort of getting to that, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, the risk comes not just from over-dependence on the hyperscalers, but the alternative cloud providers as well. And developing in-house expertise in terms of software development and orchestration platforms is absolutely key to making sure the value proposition in the telco space for GPU as a service is sufficient enough to differentiate themselves from the competition. And this shift will be crucial as they move away beyond just providing the compute or GPU as a service to actually offering AI as a service to enterprises as well. You need the in-house expertise. You can't Right now, we're seeing partnerships in this space in terms of just customizing off-the-shelf LLMs and such. But moving forward, proprietary domain-specific offerings will be another differentiator that telcos need to develop.
All right, Larbi, thanks so much for your time today. And to everyone else, I'll see you on the next episode of Unmuted.